Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Philly Fast Break podcast. I am Sean Kennedy of PhillyFastBreak.com. On the line with me is our NFL handicapper, Dan Erta. Before we jump into the conversation with him, I do want to thank our sponsor. That is JoannaPlatt.com for all your life and relationship coaching needs. That's Joanna-Platt.com, and you can check out her podcast. It's the Love Always Joe podcast. It's available through the site or on iTunes. Thank you very much to JoannaPlatt.com for sponsoring the show. Now here's Dan.
So
Dan,
I think Joanna needs to have us on her podcast and discuss how to deal with a spouse who's obsessed with football and watching football on the weekends too much instead of spending time with their spouse or significant other.
yeah, I agree. I think that would be a very worthwhile topic to dive into.
Absolutely, be a great crossover.
Yeah, no Thursday night game this week, so that helps a little bit.
A little bit.
Although there's Saturday games now, so
Exactly. I think that the women would rather spend the Thursday night watching football than a Saturday.
or just the non-football fan spouses in any relationship.
So sometimes I forget that there's such thing as non-football fans.
Hey, I mean they're just not in our circles. You exclude those people from your lives because you don't share common interests. So it's tough. It's an important part of any relationship, whether it's a spouse or a friend, is talk about gambling lines a lot.
Absolutely. If you can't say to your wife, hold on 1 second, I got the Birds at +3.5, and it's a 5-point game, and they got the ball with 2 minutes left, and she doesn't know exactly what you're talking about. You gotta break up with her, and I'm sure Joanna Platt would agree.
I think that'd probably be something we'd have to discuss on the podcast. All right, so a very successful week 15 for you, Dan. You went 3-1 last week. Unfortunately, your one loss was the play we were both on, over 52 in the New England-Pittsburgh game. I went 0-3 last week, which goes to show you can't go out of the country for a week and kind of fall out of the loop of sports and then expect to just jump back into it, no problem. So
That'll show you to go on a vacation during football season.
I know. I got to plan this stuff better. Um, but yeah, so my first offer, but another great week for you, 3-1. You keep charging along. You're having a great season. Of course, the records we post on PhillyFastBreak.com, so you can see those posted there. So great season for you thus far. We'll hope to keep it going here in week 16. And we each have two plays this week, Dan. So why don't you go ahead and give us your first one?
So the first one that I'm going to give this week is a little different. I've done this in the past. We have a 4-team money line parlay, meaning they just have to win the game. And the 4 teams I'm going to take are the Patriots. They're 13.5-point favorites at home against the Bills. I say why lay 13.5 when you can lay minus 790 on the money line and combine it with 3 other teams. I like the Colts at home against the New York Giants. I'd actually, gun to the head, I'd actually pick the Giants to cover the 9-point spread here because I think that they played an all-time horrible game last week and the Colts played an all-time great game last week. But I still think the Colts are going to take care of business at home in a must-win game against the Giants, who are going to be missing Odell Beckham again. The Cleveland Browns, who would have thought that you'd be putting a lot of faith in the Browns in a large money line parlay? But the Browns are home against the Bengals. They're 8.5-point favorites. Bengals are pretty much giving up on the season. The Browns have a 1 in 50,000 chance of making the playoffs. I'm not making that up off the top of my head. That's actually the mathematical odds of it. But they're really doing a great job. They're really coming together, and they get to stick it to Hugh Jackson at home. And the Rams laying 14.5 at Cardinals. I'm taking those 4 teams just to win the game. Rams, Browns, Colts, and Patriots. And that, if you moneyline parlay those 4, it comes out to right around minus 115.
All right, so let's see here. New England against Buffalo. They're at home, so yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. They do kind of struggle in Buffalo typically, but yeah, they're at home, so hard to see that going awry for them, even with their loss last week and their kind of recent struggles the second half of the season. Indy, yeah, they're still playing, fighting for a playoff berth, so at home.
They're
Again,
really good.
yeah, they're a good team. And yeah, against the Giants team that, probably doesn't have Odell again and has nothing to play for and looked like they rolled over and played dead against the Titans last week. Yeah, it's hard to go against Indy there. Cleveland is actually part of one of my plays, so obviously I like it. We can talk about that next when I do my play. And sorry, what was the fourth one?
So we have Patriots, Colts, Cleveland, and the Rams.
Rams,
14
right.
and a half point favorites on the road at the Cardinals. Now, the Rams have clearly not been playing their best football. They're kind of on a little bit of a downswing. But the Cardinals right now are just a mess. Their offensive line probably would be guys who would be second stringers if they went to Alabama. Maybe a slight exaggeration there. But it's just beyond brutal. I think at the very least the Rams win the game.
Yeah, I thought the 14 or 14 and a half, whatever it's at now, was way too high for the Rams on the road. But yeah, they're gonna win this. It's hard to see them losing this game, especially after they lost as a huge favorite last week against the Eagles. So even with Todd Gurley a little banged up and he's questionable to play, it's still seems like they should come out of that top one in that one, no problem. So yeah, I mean. It's a 14 money line parlay with pretty big favorites, so hard to pick anything apart too specifically. I don't have any big problems with anything you mentioned. So first pick for Dan, New England, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and the LA Rams in a 14 money line parlay. All right. So as I mentioned, my first pick also involves the Browns. I'm doing a two-team teaser. I'm teasing Cleveland down to -2.5. You touched on kind of my main points. They do have a very slim chance of making the playoffs, so they're kind of using that as a rallying cry to keep fighting here these last few weeks of the season. And they absolutely demolished Cincinnati last time these two teams met a few weeks ago, and that was in Cincinnati. They're at home now against Cleveland. They still hate Hugh Jackson just as much, and I thought 8.5 was a little high, but against the Cincinnati team that Tyler Boyd's out now. Joe Mixon's a little banged up with a wrist injury. They're on their second string quarterback. Their defense has been terrible all year. I don't see how Cleveland doesn't at least win by a field goal here at home. When they have something to play for, Cincinnati does not. So I'm teasing Cleveland down to -2.5. And the other part of that two-team teaser, I'm taking Dallas -1. Dallas looked absolutely awful against Indy last week. They had every right to feel embarrassed. They're coming back home this week. They have a lot to play for. They are still winning the division. A win in either of the last 2 weeks basically secures them the division title. But they're facing Tampa, who has looked. Tampa's not been good all season, but at least in the first half of the season, Tampa's offense was really good. They haven't been good the llast couple of weeks. The under has hit in both Tampa's games each of the last 2 weeks. They only scored 12 last week. They haven't even been the fun aerial attack that everybody saw in the first 8 to 10 weeks of the season. They look like they packed it in for the year. Dallas needs this game. Tampa Bay does not. Dallas is at home. I'm teasing them down to -1. Cleveland -2.5. Dallas -1. That's my two-team teaser for my first play.
Yeah, man, I like it. I already discussed Cleveland. I clearly like them to win the game, and under a field goal, it's a very good number for you. Dallas was almost in my parlay. I almost made it a 5-team parlay, and I would have gotten plus money on the whole thing. I just backed off a little bit because Dallas has been a little bit you never know what team's going to show up. They've looked great sometimes. They've looked terrible sometimes. I will say a couple of things. Tampa Bay plays a man-to-man defense, which is exactly the kind of defense that Dallas has had success against, specifically Amari Cooper. All of his big games since being acquired were against a man defense. Indianapolis plays a zone, and you saw Dak and the offense as a whole struggle against them. Now, if that was just because the defense was so good, or maybe other factors like the team wasn't completely focused, it wasn't really a good spot for them, that could be it. I don't know. It's just Tampa Bay is competent, and they just have so many weapons on offense. I hate betting against them, laying a lot of points against them, because they do have a lot of really good receivers and tight ends and people who can put up points. But like I said, they were the last cut from that parlay, and if all goes if things happen the way they should, Dallas will win the game.
Yeah, I think I obviously agree since making them one of my plays. Yeah, I like that. I like that outlook for Amari Cooper. In the one fantasy league I'm still alive in, I have Cooper, so hopefully a big.
Yeah, it seems like Cooper and Dak specifically struggle. Dak just seems, for some reason, the zone throws him off. Like the Redskins play man to man, and that was the game Amari Cooper had his breakout game. Anytime you can get the ball in his hands and let him make one guy miss and he's gone, and I think it's a good spot and a good situation. And I bet against Dallas last week on our against the Colts. And one of the reasons was they had just won the big game against the Eagles. They're probably celebrating a little bit. They probably don't really care too much to go on the road when they have games against Tampa. And the Giants coming up, really only one win seals the division. So, yeah, I feel like they're going to be focused and ready to roll. I like it. I just didn't want that game to ruin the parlay for me.
All right, so Cleveland -2.5, Dallas -1, two-team teaser for me. Dan, what's your second play of the week?
Second and final play for me this week is we're going with a team that in the beginning of the season, you and I talked about being a potential 3-13 team. They are not, and now I am taking them getting 2.5 points against the Super Bowl favorite. The Seattle Seahawks +2.5 at home against the Chiefs. Love everything about this spot. Seahawks coming off a bad road loss, coming back home where they have an extremely large home field advantage. And the Chiefs are good. I still think at the end of the day, the Chiefs are going to be right there in the AFC, but they're not quite as dynamic. They have a couple of internal things going on with the Kareem Hunt situation. They're still trying to get, like, you could say what you want. Damian Williams did score 2 touchdowns last week. He's not the same. He's not just quite as dynamic as Hunt was. And I just like the spot a lot for Seattle. They're really playing well. They need to continue to win to assure themselves a playoff spot. They're pretty much in, but mathematically they're not. And I just think this is a very good situation for them to win the game. I like them outright, but I'll take 2.5 points. You never know. It could be like a 24-23 game either way. So give me the 2.5 with the home team.
All right, so Dan's taking Seattle +2.5. Yeah, I saw you tweet about this earlier in the week, so I had a feeling this was going to be a pick for you. You're definitely right. It's the right spot. Seattle very rarely has been a home underdog in the Pete Carroll era, so you have to think that you want to jump on that opportunity when it presents itself. My only hesitancy was that, yeah, Seattle needs this game, but KC does too. There's a big difference between winning the AFC West and getting one of those wild cards. It's the difference between being potentially even the number 1 seed in the AFC and being number 5 and having to go on the road in week 1. So they have every incentive to win this game as well. And less than a field goal favorite. I think this game could go either way, really. So could I see KC winning by 3? Absolutely. So that was my only hesitancy, and it made me stay away from it. Although, despite the fact that getting points at home is a pretty prime spot. So I understand where you're coming from with that. But that was my one devil's advocate argument for not going with Seattle here. But all right, so Dan is taking Seattle +2.5. That's his second and final play for the week. My second and final play is Baltimore on the road +4.5. I know this is kind of contrary to what I just talked about with the difference in finishing first and second in the AFC West, but Baltimore's in LA to face the Chargers this week. I just think 4.5 is a little too high. I think the Chargers are, they're a little banged up. They have Keenan Allen, who's a very questionable play this week with his hip injury. Melvin Gordon is supposed to be back, but they're going to be monitoring his snaps. Austin Eckler, I think, is out, so we'll see more of third stringer Justin Jackson. But obviously, LA has a lot of weapons even behind Gordon and Allen. Mike Williams had the huge game last week after Allen went out. So I think that they still will likely win this game, but I just think 4.5 against a Baltimore team that's been playing solid defense all year. Ever since Lamar Jackson took over, they've been having a great running game that kind of lends itself to chewing up the clock, keeping it a little lower scoring, more of a close game. Baltimore, they're in a playoff hunt themselves. They need both games down the stretch here, so they're going to be getting in everything they have. So I understand it's on the road, but Chargers, as we discussed, don't have a great home field advantage. It's oftentimes there's been more fans of the opposing team in the stadium than there have been Chargers fans. So 4.5, a little high. I think Baltimore is going to definitely keep this one close, so I'll take getting that many points in this situation. Baltimore plus 4.5 for me.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited to watch this game. I think it's going to be a fun game. Lamar Jackson has been excellent since he took over, but just the sheer luck in the teams that the Ravens have been playing since he took over, I believe they're all in the bottom 6 or 7 in DVOA against the run. And that has allowed them to do what they're doing. They've really not faced any situation where they fall behind 10-0 or 14-0 or anything like that. And they really put the pressure on Lamar to actually have to throw the ball. And the reason I stayed away from this game is because I think there was a chance, Keenan Allen's supposed to be playing, so the offense should be at full speed except for the running back. There's a chance San Diego at home goes up 10-0, and then what? Do we know what this Baltimore Ravens team with Lamar Jackson can do when they fall behind 10-0 and they actually have to throw the ball and they can't just be running all the time? And maybe at 10-0 in the first half, you could still run the ball and play your style. But at some point, if he actually has to make a play with his arm, with throwing the ball, can he do it? That's why I laid off. The last couple of weeks, this week especially, you have been making plays that were literally the last or second to last one cut off of my list of plays. And that's the reason that I cut this. But overall, you got to love getting the points with the team that's playing extremely well. And they kind of... The team feels really good about the fact that Joe Flacco's gone. Now, Flacco won the Super Bowl for them, but it's been no secret that he's been hindering them for the last couple of years. Kind of a statue in the pocket. His whole offense is him chucking the ball deep downfield and hoping for a pass interference. So yeah, I like the Ravens. I really like this team. I'm actively rooting for them because I really like Lamar Jackson and I like what they're doing. I couldn't take Lamar Jackson on the road against a team that I could see getting off to a hot start against them. I hope you're right, and gun to my head, I would pick the Chargers.
All right, fair enough. I guess I'm just taking your scraps with some of these last cuts for you. All right, so that concludes our Week 16 discussion. We have 2 plays apiece. Dan is doing a 4-team money line parlay with New England, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and the LA Rams. He's also on Seattle plus 2.5. I have a 2-team teaser with Cleveland down to minus 2.5 and Dallas minus 1, and Baltimore plus 4.5 is my other play for Week 16. All right, Dan. So big Eagles game this week. They looked like the Super Bowl champions of old with Nick Foles under center last week. We didn't discuss this, but they're 1.5 point favorites at home against the Texans. They still have a 46% chance to make the playoffs. Obviously, they need to win both games here. What are your feelings about that one? Are you going to the game? And what do you think about it?
Well, it's crazy how much things can change in one day. I went from, not to make myself, I'm not trying to brag or make myself sound like a good person here. I went from, we were assuming the Eagles were going to lose against the Rams. And we figured it wasn't even going to be worth selling the tickets because once the Eagles were done, we wouldn't be able to make any money for it whatsoever. So we were actually we were going to give the tickets away to somebody, maybe someone who's never, like a kid and a father who's never gotten a chance to go to a game because tickets get extremely expensive, especially on the StubHub market. We were already exploring those options. And then they won the game on Sunday, and now it's a playoff atmosphere again. Now everyone wants to go to this game. We had the underdog masks last year, and they're trying to replicate that this year with these ski masks, which, I don't know, it seems like a little bit of a corny attempt to recreate last year's magic, but if that's what they need, that's what they need. You got Foles in there again like they did last year. I will be at the game. I'm extremely excited. I like the Eagles. I almost made them a play. The only thing is, I don't really think that the Vikings are going to lose either of their last 2 games. And that's a big deal because we need them to. So I feel like the Eagles are going to win this week. I think it's going to be exciting. But the Vikings are on the road against Detroit. Detroit's very depleted. They have not been looking very good. They're home, so they have that going for them. And their defense is pretty good. But I kind of think the Vikings win, and then they have a home game Week 17 against Chicago, and depending on how things play out this week, we could be seeing Chicago's backups. So, they could have avoided all this if they just didn't blow a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter against Carolina, or they didn't give up a 4th and 15 in overtime against Tennessee. So we got no one to blame but ourselves. But just the fact that we're playing an exciting game right now is a lot more than we thought was going to happen a week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, they certainly left a lot of opportunities on the table this season. So, as you mentioned, they only have to look themselves in the mirror to see who to blame. But yeah, at least they have a puncher's chance now. Well, better than a puncher's chance. They have almost even odds to make the playoffs. Obviously, got to get it done at home this weekend. But yeah, good for Philadelphia fans. Some excitement in the city. Good for you. Get to go to a fun game this weekend. Bad for some kid who still will never have been to an Eagles game. So.
I'll
Uh,
give I'll give that kid my preseason tickets next year. It'll be fine.
all right. I'm sure he will look forward to that. All right, Dan. So,
He's a huge Nate Sudfeld fan, so he'll appreciate that a lot.
I mean, who doesn't love Studfeld? You
That's
got it.
One of the subplots for the last 2 weeks that I'm actually looking at a lot is there's a lot of teams that are going to need a quarterback, and this upcoming NFL draft is terrible in terms of quarterback. Justin Herbert might even go back to school, but if he comes out, he's the clear number one. Other than that, I don't like any of these guys. So I'm thinking like teams are going to try to look for backups, guys like Nick Mullins and even Nate Sudfeld, Jacoby Brissett, guys like that who are buried in the depth chart on other teams who could give them a better chance to win. Because these guys coming out this year are terrible. So that's the one thing I'm actually watching the last couple of weeks of the season is what kind of backups can do. Like remember the Matt Flynn game?
I do, and he made himself a lot of money on that game.
Absolutely. And there's always going to be one general manager who's stupid enough to be like, if he did it for that, who doesn't understand the value of circumstances, and he'll be like, oh, he did it in that game, he could do it for us. So yeah, you know what? The last 2 weeks. That's the one thing I'm keeping an eye on: the backup quarterbacks who can play well, potentially play themselves into a role.
All right, so we may have missed the opportunity, or even Nick Foles could work himself into a nice payday.
Yeah, well, Nick Foles is a free agent though, so it's not even. I don't even think.
Yeah, it's just not benefiting us, but he's a guy that could definitely make himself some money. Talking about those.
Bovada currently has will Nick Foles be a starter week 1 of the 2019 NFL season? Yes is minus 220.
Yeah, how could he not be? He's a Super Bowl MVP within the last calendar year. Like, how many teams are starting terrible quarterbacks where that would be an obvious upgrade? I don't see why he wouldn't be. He's definitely going to get paid by someone. I think the question is how much at this point, and I think that'll partially be determined by these next 2 weeks.
Yep.
All right, so Dan, enjoy the game on Sunday, and good luck with your 2 picks this week. And for everybody listening, enjoy all the NFL action this weekend, and we'll talk to you for Week 17.
See you next week.